Welcome to today's episode. It is the last day of March, and you're listening to the podcast where we discuss the most recent installment of a different series every show. However, today we're discussing a series which came out, I think, at the beginning of March.
I think it was March
Scarpetta.
11th. Yeah.
Yeah, back in 1990. It's not that old, but back in 1990, one-time reporter and computer analyst for the Chief Medical Examiner Office of Virginia, Patricia Cornwell, had her book Postmortem published by Charles Scribner's sons, the same people who published way back when The Great Gatsby, Peter Pan.
You're talking about like the 30s and 40s.
I'm talking about this is a very famous publication firm. So if she got a book deal, then it was for a reason. Postmortem was based on the 1987 summer stranglings in Richmond. So she was right in that center part of it because she worked in the chief medical examiner office as one of the computer analysts, like I said. But it was the first installment of her Case Scarpetta series. And now 36 years later.
And 29 books later.
Yes, 29 books later, it has been adapted by Amazon Prime, starring Nicole Kidman, Simon Baker, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Bobby Cannavale. My preparation for watching the pilot, Bridge of Time Part 1, was reading Postmortem. And I thought that primarily that was going to be all that the first season encompassed. So I was a little shocked when I saw that there were actually two separate storylines. But we should talk about the book first, I think. The book is very thorough, however, very straightforward. You're used to reading a lot of like Harlan Coben books, I think.
Yes.
Or Alice Feeney, All Her Faults, Andrea Amaro, like him and her or whatever, where there's so many twists and it's convoluted and that's not what this is.
So it's just you find out things along the way, but it's not supposed to be like a major thing by the end.
Here's what the summary is. Chief Medical Examiner Case Scarpetta. She's tracking down a serial killer through crime scenes and the bodies he's leaving behind with her staff, a cop named Marino, a FBI profiler named Wesley, a bunch of other people who didn't quite make it into the show quite yet or haven't had a big part, a reporter, and she's following all these clues at the same time as being set up as the scapegoat for her department for why the investigation is taking so long. Very similar to the Untamed show, I think, the Eric Bana show.
Eric Bana show, the Netflix show.
Where they kept on trying to use him as the excuse for the reason for people not finding the right people in time or finding the murderer in time, while also having to take care of her young niece, Lucy. Now, that's only half of the plot in the TV show, but what was cool about the book was that it was filled with 90s references. Like DNA testing was new. So they kept talking about that. And she, like I said, she's very thorough because she worked in the office.
Right.
So she likes to be clinical with her explanations. And it can be a lot,
But it seemed like when it was describing it in the first book that it was supposed to be like cutting edge technology because it was straight up 1990.
Yeah. And they talk about polygraph tests being very accurate and stuff. And you'd be like, well, that's not exactly true. IBM PCs were like, how people used to defrag their drives?
Yeah.
No one's ever done that since the 1990s. That was talked about. Station wagons, microcassettes, MTV. She would smoke in her office. She's addicted to smoking, and that stayed consistent in the series. She's basically Constantine. They brought up Maggie Thatcher, Dury rugs, AIDS, non-computerized 911 records. That's how she ends up solving the whole damn thing. That's not too much of a spoiler, I promise. And then Eddie Murphy. They even threw Eddie Murphy in there because he was super famous.
So this was very interesting because they adapted two books, Autopsy, which came out in 2021, but there's been so many stylistic changes from the book series. Like, for example, was Postmortem, was it written in third person or first person?
It was written in first person.
Yeah, so starting from the 11th book onward, The Last Precinct, the events changed from past to present tense. From the 12th book onward, it changes from first person to third person omniscient. They wanted to take in the viewpoint of the murderers, where before I think that they were just trying to get kind of Jay Scarpetta's view of everything.
Case Scarpetta?
Case Scarpetta, yeah. Sorry. In Case Scarpetta, I'm not sure if they said this at the very end of the book, her character has kind of influenced a lot of TV shows shows like CSI and Cold Case
Surely,
Files.
because like she's not only just looking at the bodies, she's kind of embracing the detective atmosphere almost too much.
Mm.
You know how like sometimes they'd have blood splatter analyst Dexter walk in
Dexter,
there
yeah.
and he'd be able to solve the crime, but he wouldn't actually be working the case outside. Like he would solve it for himself so that he could go murder the
People
murderers.
later on, yeah.
But she is actually like straight up leading investigations, which is weird. But she's also teaming up with like the cops, and that makes more sense. But like, I'll give you an instance of how Patricia Cornwell likes to write the details. This is just a little part of her book. It says, there was no point in explaining that, no, I am not a coroner. Coroners are elected officials. They usually aren't forensic pathologists. You can be a gas station attendant and get elected coroner in some states. I let him think he was right in the right ballpark, and this only made matters worse. So like again, Kay Scarpetta, I think, is just another version of Patricia Cornwell, like thinking that she would get annoyed probably by how people acted to her department when she was working there, and she gets to like, I guess, write it out. This is therapy to her.
It reminds me a lot of like Perry Mason. I remember the person who wrote that TV show, I think, was also a lawyer as well.
Yeah,
So, and I pretty people were pretty sure Perry Mason was just kind of an anecdote or a character that was just supposed to be the writer of that. It seems like you're saying the same thing with Patricia Cornwell
yeah. There
here.
really aren't that many lawyers though when it comes to at least the first book. But anyways, all I knew was that Nicole Kidman was starring in it, so I assumed this was going to still take place in the 90s and that she was going to be Scarpetta. And I was in for a surprise. They didn't actually change the 90s storyline all that much. They kept it really consistent to what I've read. However, that's only like 40% of the show so far.
Right, because the reason that they put in the autopsy, which is the 25th book of
Yeah.
the whole thing, was because they wanted to show, or at least the person who created this show, Elizabeth Sarnoff, said that she wanted to show the difference of a female character who is 30 and 55. So my understanding is that Dr. Kay Scarpetta is supposed to be very different in the timelines.
Not really, not so far.
Really?
But
Okay.
I do think that the younger version, Rosie McEwen,
Hmm.
that's the version of Scarpetta that I read.
Yeah.
She does a good job looking and acting like a younger version of Nicole Kidman's character in this. I think that they work off each other well, even though they've never been in the same scene thus far. 1998, they did age it up a little bit for the past,
Yeah.
because the original was taking place over the real life murders of like 1987, but I think it was like 1990 in the books. I'm not sure. I just know it was summer. That was when they found the first victim, or the first victim that was talked about in the case, Lori Peterson. So they kept Lori Peterson. They kept Matt Peterson, her husband. They kept Lucy as the niece when she's like 9 years old. However, then you jump to the future and you see that Lucy is still, at this point, she'd have to be in her late 30s.
Yes, so this is something that is very funny to me. The whole entire show is supposed to be about age, and age has been a constant complaint actually about the Scarpetta's books because apparently there's some times where the events take place later on, but she ages in reverse. Like,
Yeah. So while I was reading Scarpetta, she didn't sound like a young woman. Like they may have said that she was 30, but I didn't get that feeling because she talked about it like she'd been around the block a few times. She
right.
was even dating one of, I think, like the older detectives in the first book. He hasn't been shown to be her lover in the series yet. So I don't know if they stuck to that. But like, I would not have pinned her for the time jump to equal out it was, but she was less the issue than I think Lucy was because Lucy in the older version acts really immature for someone who's nearing 40,
Hmm.
you know?
How so?
Well, I mean, the first scene we see with her, she's at the graveyard looking at her dead wife. And apparently, she's turned her into an AI so that she can hang out with her still. She's a computer genius. And then she's hearing her aunt and her mom just bicker at each other. The aunt is only mentioned, or sorry, her mom, Lucy's mom, is only mentioned in the book as far as like that she's getting married at the same time that Kay Scarpetta is looking after Lucy. And
Right.
so it's Auntie Kay, and we never actually see Dorothy. However, when I saw who's playing the aunt, it kind of made sense because she's played such a bad mom in The Bear.
Yeah.
For Jamie Lee Curtis to then play kind of a similar character where she's just this free loving spirit, but at the same time at the cost of her family's sake.
So there's a big reason for that and why Jamie Lee Curtis is in the show. Post more or like ever since Postmortem, really the K Scarpetta series it's had such trouble being brought to screen. Like even in 1992, Demi Moore was supposed to play her. They were even thinking Angelina Jolie in 2009 for a big screen franchise. But then finally in early 2021, Jamie Lee Curtis, she's like the main reason this show was made because she wanted to produce it, reached out to her producing partner, Jason Blum. So that's why Blumhouse Productions is in this. And then she was even responsible for casting Bobby Cannavale and Ariana DeBose, Lucy, in the TV series. So she's kind of been like the one that really headed it. That's why she's been the reason the show was made.
Right, and that's great, and I'm not surprised that at the beginning of the '90s, they were trying like, on the tail end of the Hannibal, series and stuff like that,
Right.
it just feels like that type of, story was certainly in Hollywood, quite a lot, and so, I'm not surprised that who signed on for it. My thing is, like, in the book, the story is so heavily dramatizing the actual murder, which makes sense because it's serious and you're looking at dead bodies, while in the show, this at least with the future storyline, the current 2026 storyline, it's all about the family drama. Like the climax of the story is not the fact that they found another body at the end and that they realized that, oh no, the killer from the 90s is back.
All those years ago.
Like that's a big twist, of course, but it's not the main climax. The main climax was the two sisters, Dorothy and Kay, just going at it, like punching each other and getting into a pissy fight about the fact that Kay is too light on Lucy. Again, Lucy is supposed to be like 40 years old and she's living at Dorothy's place. But she also makes the comment like, oh, I earned enough money by the time that I was 13 that I can afford to live wherever I want. So I'm not a freeloader. And I was just like, you guys got to like shape up. And even the husband seemed like completely at odds with like what they wanted to do here. Cause that's where Bobby Cannavale plays Marino and Wesley is played by the guy from like The Mentalist, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just a whole like messy family, dysfunctional family storyline that I wasn't quite expecting for the future.
It reminds me a little bit of Imperfect Woman, where it was like the whole entire plot of that was that one of the friends, it was supposed to be a murder mystery, but you really weren't spending a lot of time on the actual mystery. You were just spending time on kind of the families and how it affected them. Did you find yourself, did the past storyline at least give you
Past
enough story?
storyline is adapting the book almost like exactly like I remember it. Of course, it's an abbreviated version of it,
Right.
but like they find Laurie Peterson, they interview, interrogate Matt Peterson. Marino has his suspicions about him. Kay goes home. She's seeing Lucy. Lucy is all up in her business with the computer. Like she's like defragmenting it for her. And so that for a while is freaking Kay out a little bit. But then she ends up working with Lucy later on to figure out how some people have broken into her computer. There's also the chain smoking I mentioned. The clues about the serial killer have remained the same mostly. There's one big one that has not shown up at all, which
Huh.
I think they might be saving, but like it was apparent right at the start of the book. But some of the ones that they kept is the maple syrup smell in the room, like a stale maple syrup smell. The fact that all the victims seem to have a contralto voice. That's a very strange word. So when Matt said it, I was like, yep, that's straight from the book. The fact that the serial killer is a non secretor. Hadn't heard that term
Yeah. Mhm.
before, but it just means that they can't tell what blood type it is or much from their jizz.
Yeah. No, again, secretion. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and then, the fact that he ties up the victims and beats and rapes them. So it's one thing to read that in a book because you kind of have seen that in a lot of books. Remember in Presumed Innocent, they showed you
Yes.
the pictures of the victim, and that was, like, pretty grisly,
I think
but
that was
they
like Bunny Davis. That was her name, I believe.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying the way they did it in the show, the Jake Gyllenhaal, like,
Right.
performance, he pulls out the pictures rather than showing too much of the actual crime scene. In this, you're seeing a naked, tied up person getting the autopsy done or just, like, sitting on the bed the way that it's written in the book, and it is disturbing. Like, it's really gross, and
It's
so
it's really
if you
funny to hear you say that because David Gordon Green, actually, this is a reunion with Jamie Lee Curtis because he directed, wrote, and executively produced the newest Halloween trilogy. But when it comes to TV, he just does a ton of comedies. Eastbound and Down, Vice Principals, The Righteous Gemstones, even the pilot of The Sex Life of College Girls. It seems like this is the first ever TV show that he's done that isn't supposed to be that. And so you saying that's very disturbing, I think he would take as a compliment.
well, yeah, because he, like, cut off the hands of the victims, and so we see, I think, at least 2. We see one in the f one we see Lori from the past, and then we see I think, Gwen Haney from the future. She's next to a train, so she's not in a house, and then they find her house later on where they assume that the murder happened. But, like, yeah, they've got the noose around their throat, and then they're still describing it. Kay imagining the way that she, like, does her investigation while she's taking the pictures, you get these flash cuts of the attack as it's happening, and it's like, "Whoa, you guys did not shy away from showing some things." They also changed, I think, the babysitter's name from, like, Bertha to Yaya and made her, like, super Jewish because she's talking about, like, the Nazis and stuff like that, and Marino is definitely less gruff than he was when I was reading in Marino from the first book reminded me of Columbo.
Oh,
And
interesting.
where like there was no chance that these two characters would ever hook up. They are friends, but purely platonically by the end of the thing. In this, they completely like turned that around and they made it seem like Bobby Cannavale, but like the younger version. I don't know who plays him,
It's his
but
son, Jacob
oh my
Lumet
god,
Cannavale.
really?
Yeah, no, and it's funny because he was actually in my favorite show of 2022, The Offer, as, like, Joe Colombo's right-hand man, and
They
so, yeah.
they did a Wyatt Russell on him. They had him playing like the different version of himself from what was it, the Godzilla
I
franchise.
didn't know either, but when I saw a picture of him, I was like, "Oh, yeah, no, they look similar."
Also, the younger version of the Mentalist guy is played by Silas from Weeds.
Yes, right.
Yeah, and he's actually they switched him out. He wasn't the love interest in the book.
Oh,
Not at least in this book.
so they cast Hunter Parrish, and they were like, "There you go. We need to make him the."
I think it's more like because I've read postmortem, that's the sense I get about Kay Scarpetta. But obviously, they've retconned probably a bunch of stuff about her. Like you've said, they've even changed the perspective of the books. That by the end, maybe Wesley is absolutely like dating her and married to her. But I don't know.
I know the changes were approved by Patricia Cornwell, all the ones that they made for the TV show.
So we're at the beginning of the investigation in the past, and I know where that one's going, but then we're at a new investigation in the future, and it's either a copycat, but the copycat has Matt Peterson's fingerprints on it. And Matt Peterson was not the ultimate villain of the first book.
Mhm.
And I would be kind of surprised if they just gave away who the villain was in the first episode. I think that may be a red herring, but I don't know.
I don't know who it was, but I know that they did change things, some major things, one major change in the book.
It does feel like this was made for those people like me who were just expecting another, like, kind of it not boring because you know this whole story, but kind of with the Harlan Coben books where it kind of sticks to all the same twists, and you're like, "I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming." Now I don't. I certainly don't know what the ending thing is going to be, or even in the '90s storyline, if they're going to change the ultimate person who did it there, I will be quite surprised. That makes me wanna see it a little bit more, but there are some things that I told you the drama is a little overkill for me. The fact that I like that they added more references, updated the references, because
Right.
part of the book I liked was the '90s references, and now they're talking about 3D printing human organs and AI, and we're literally seeing the AI in work. Another thing I liked about it was its soundtrack. They used both the Animals version of House of the Rising Sun, one of my favorite songs, and then they used the Sinead O'Connor version of it later on in the episode, and I thought that was smartly done. Overall,
Did you recognize Patricia Cornwell because she makes a cameo appearance in the first episode?
I don't know what she looks like.
She's swearing in Dr. K. Scarpetta as the Virginia chief
Okay,
medical
I know who
examiner.
she played now, but I wouldn't have known that that was her. One of the interesting things they did in the show was that she has taken some time off. Scarpetta and Marino, who she hires by the end of the first episode, no longer a cop, but as like one of her like lead, I guess, investigators for whatever she does. So like she's brought him aboard. They're both coming back after a long break, and they haven't explained what the long break is from. And they also brought back Margaret from the book, Maggie in the show, but Maggie is now an evil villain, sort of, because she's sort of a spy that has been put into Scarpetta's department to
Huh.
watch her. And there's this very awkward scene where she walks into the bathroom while Nicole Kidman is showering, and she's like, "Wow, Scarpetta, you've really kept up your figure." And then later on in the scene, she's still looking at her all weird, and she's like, "Yeah, incredible." And then just like walks out. And this is like This is like a 50, 60-year-old woman herself.
It sounds like a generic female written villain,
It was a
you know?
creepy bathroom scene, so not my favorite there. Like I said, it's funny to see Jamie Lee Curtis continue to play bad
Mhm.
moms. I think she enjoys it at this point.
Yeah, and also, I do have to give it up, I think, for Nicole Kidman because she has executively produced ever since 2020 10 shows,
Yeah.
of which she has starred in 6, appeared in 7, and that's not even including Margot's Got Money Troubles premiering next month or Big Little Lies season 3, which is set to come out in
And they're
August.
like all over the map too. Like a few years ago, she randomly showed up in the Taylor Sheridan show, and then she was in Expats, and then she's done movies. She was in the Baby
Baby
Girl
girl
movie.
movie, yeah.
Yeah, no, busy lady. And in this one, because they played like if her younger version didn't look anything like her, that would be really annoying. But I think the younger version also deserves some credit.
Yeah.
Rosie McEwen.
Yeah, I was wondering if you recognized her. She was the villain in Black Mirror, the magical amulet episode, if you
I
remember
like
that.
her better in this. The magical amulet one is the one where she's able to manipulate
Yeah,
reality.
right.
And so you're saying she's British.
I think so, yeah.
Maybe. Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't think Nicole Kidman is. The weird difference is, again, is Matt Peterson playing the future villain here. He's kind of a minor character in the first book, so that's new.
Mhm.
And then yeah, I'm waiting for certain clues to show up. Bill isn't a I don't think that's a spoiler either, is that they introduced like Bill Bolts or whatever, but they don't really say too much about him. Just like the reporter, we see her for like a split second. Both of them I know are going to be a bigger deal later on in the show. Lucy growing up weird kind of made me sad because I liked when they showed that she was like a 9-year-old super genius computer geek because that's such a 90s thing to do to a character.
From what I understand, there's been times where, Lucy is, like, 30 years old in the novel, but somehow Kay Scarpetta has only aged, like, 10 years since then, so that's what I meant by kind of the ages being a
She's a
little bit off.
vampire, which brings to my comparisons. You have iZombie, where she worked in a morgue, and then she was like eating some of the brains. So maybe that's how she preserves her youth. There was the presumed innocent because of the way that the bodies were killed and strung up.
Yeah.
The Gray House. Why the Gray House?
I don't know.
Richmond, Virginia.
Oh,
A lot of
okay.
this series is talking about like Richmond, and I guess when the book was originally written, Richmond was one of the highest crime rate, homicide rates of the whole country, and
They
that she
yeah.
makes a big deal about that. But now you look at it in 2026, and they're no longer that. So it is funny that like it outlived its relevance of being a crime ridden city.
Well, they didn't actually shoot in Virginia, they shot in Nashville because Tennessee's
Well, that
tax
explains
incentive
everything. No, I'm just
tax
kidding.
incentive is great. Also, it was given a 2-season order, and they're currently filming the 2nd season, which are going to take place around the 4th and 5th book in the series.
I won't keep up with that. I will probably tune in, just like skip through to see if they keep the same bad guy. But partially, I guess, because it isn't as convoluted and twisty, I'm not looking forward to as much
Yeah.
as sometimes I am. But at the same time, I respect the acting more because so last comparisons I'll make is like Bones.
Oh,
She's got a
okay.
little bit of a deadpan personality,
But
like
it's not episodic, right?
Deschanel or
This
whatever.
this is more, like, serialized or
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, but I mean, Bones could do. They had like 24 episode seasons at least at the start, and they would have a really long arc, sometimes. And then True Calling, that Elijah Dushku show, anything that has a morgue in it, I was just throwing that out there. Ultimately, I'm sort of impressed that they did stay close to the book when it came to the 90s, and I'm willing to give it a break because of all the acting talent they have.
So what are you gonna give it out of
I'm gonna
10?
give it a 7 out of 10. And again, no promises whether or not to finish the series, but as far as the pilot's concerned, yeah, it was okay.
It's, very strange, like, it's gone mixed reviews, and for a second, it was funny because, a couple days ago, it had a 5.9 on IMDb, a 59% on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 5.9 on Prime Video. Now it
Mhm.
has a 6 on IMDb, and again, it just depends on where you're looking at. IndieWire gave it a C+, plus, but also a tomato on Rotten Tomatoes, saying that they enjoyed the weirdness, and then Variety gave it a very positive review, while RogerEbert.com gave it a very negative review, calling it uninteresting, so it just depends on who you are.
I don't think Roger Ebert would like the book then, because the book is, I would say, even less interesting. It's again much more straightforward and much more clinical.
Mm.
Yeah, but that's where we'll leave it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.